It's already time. Good morning, everyone. Myself Ayush Raj, Chair TYM, welcoming you all for our next webinar, which is on a very interesting topic, that is design of NATM tunnel supports in soft ground condition. I would like to welcome Mr. Sharik Khan, lead specialist tunnel at Cove India Private Limited, for giving us time from his busy schedule to deliver this webinar come lecture and enlighten us for this wonderful topic. Just to start, I will brief Mr. Sarik Khan a little. He is the lead specialist right now at Tunnels at Cove India Private Limited. He has over 13 years of experience in designing tunnels and underground infrastructure, specializing in rock design application. He has design experience of several large hydropower project and transportation project in reaches mountains of Himalayas in India, Nepal, and Bhutan. He is a life member of Indian Geotechnical Society and ISRMTT and an executive committee member of IGS Delhi chapter, and it is also a member of technical committee of rock mechanics of Bureau of Indian Standards. So I would request Mr. Sharik Khan to just start with his presentation.
Thank you, Ayush. Thank you very much for a very good introduction. And I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my experience with you guys. I mean, it's all learning. When you share something, you get to learn something new from the audience. So I hope my screen is visible and my voice is audible.
Yes, Sharik.
Okay.
Just one thing. Those who wants to ask any question, they can put their question in the chat box. We'll discuss this after the presentation.
Yeah.
Sharik, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. So this will be a webinar to discuss, as the subject says, design of NATM tunnel support system in soft ground conditions. So this will be about 50 slides of explaining the concept of NATM supports and a brief case study, which I would also like to share. So bear with me because I have a bad throat, so voice will be a little low. Uh, yeah, so let us start the presentation. So this will be the brief contents of my talk today. We'll start with an introduction, the philosophy, the need and advantages of NATM, and over to excavation methodologies and various design principles, then soft ground condition, and followed by the case study in the end. So to just give you a brief introduction of NATM, what do we understand from this? So this is new Austrian tunneling methodology, which was developed in middle 90s, 1950 to 1960 in Austria, specifically for weak rocks, soft ground conditions. And the bottom line is that the tunnel supports which we design should neither be too stiff and it should neither be too flexible, and it should neither be applied so too early or too late. We'll discuss what this all these means in the course of our talk. But before that, I would like to, explain that NATM is just a developed philosophy. It's still developing, and it's a concept. So and it's neither a design philosophy nor a construction method. It's a concept, and you can apply this concept to your understanding and to your requirements. But the bottom line remains same, and that is the build as you go. So, and below is the picture of two different type of tunnels of similar sizes but at different time zones. And left side was in some earlier 80s, I think in Lower Thames, where we have a very high, very rigid supports with steel ribs, leggings, concrete, and whatnot. And on the right side, we have a very thin support in the similar kind of strata, having very light shotcrete and mild ribs. So why do we need NATM? as we know that tunnels were already being built even before 90s, and tunnels have been in existence even before the invention of motorized vehicles. So, but there was a requirement or a need to improve the tunnel excavation and support techniques, the methodologies to handle and tackle difficult ground conditions. In Central Europe, there have been a lot of instances where the tunneling environment was there has been accidents, casualties, and uncertainties and incidences where people think there is a need to revise the whole construction philosophy. So there have been a lot of work, lot of research in developing the concepts, and finally it was arrived at NATM, the New Austrian tunneling methodology, in 1960s by main researchers Rapsik, Muller, and Pecher. So they presented this NATM methodology and philosophy, where they propose to use the strength of the rock mass, the strength of the ground, to act as a initial support system, supporting element rather than a loading element. So, and use of thin or flexible or deformable supports as a primary tunnel support systems, rather than going with a very stiff or very rigid support system right from the moment of excavation. So, what is the philosophy? So, philosophy says about taking the advantage of load bearing capacity of the weak rocks. As we know that rock has to dilate when it will yield. Whenever you excavate, it will try to yield, it will try to converge, but during the convergence it has also to dilate. So this is the dilation is the phenomena which they try to harness or utilize, so that it form a self-supporting element all around the tunnel, and the stresses at the tunnel will go on dissipating when we allow this tunnel to deform or yield or dilate, and then the supporting rock mass will become a load carrying element rather than a load bearing element or load transmitting element. So for that, our initial support system has to be flexible, it has to be deformable, and the controlled deformations are allowed to occur in the initial supporting system. And after we satisfied with the decrease in the rate of deformations, uh, we conclude the support and we then go for the final support system. Or it may be so happen that the initial support system can be considered as the final support system. So this is a very old, you know, demonstration of various loosening zones around a tunnel, but still valid. Sorry. So when we excavate a tunnel, there has to be a loosening zone around it, and after above that loosening zone, there is another zone which is called intact rock arch. This shaded zone. So this shaded zone is the arch or the zone which provides the stability. So the idea of an ATM is that to activate or to mobilize this intact rock arch and then support your loosening zone with initial support system, and allow this initial rock arch to form and to activate, so that it contributes in the stability of the tunnel. And your initial supports are already there to support the immediate loosening zone, so that we don't need to go for very heavy or rigid supports. And when this rock arch is activated, we will see that there is a decay in the deformations in the convergence. So, and yeah, so when this is activated, we are happy and we say that our initial supports are okay and we need not to worry about it. But when we see that deformations are not decreasing after a sufficient time, we go on modifying our initial supports or primary supports, and then it's a go as you build, as I said. We try to achieve the self-support capacity of the rock and then minimize the tunnel deformations by initial supports. Yeah. So what we get from NATM, we get, of course, the increased excavation efficiency, because we don't have to apply a lot of supports. We don't have to waste time in installation of heavy supports or fabrication of heavy ribs. It's easy to construct because we can go with we can start from the least or the lightest support and then go on increasing. So, and we can use flexible components which are versatile, which are universally available. So need not to have very heavy or specified supports transported from here and there. These supports can be fabricated at sites. And we created safe tunneling environment for workers because initial support systems can be placed very quickly, and workers can move in the tunnel and go for excavation at the another phase. Uh, because it's a light system, so it's economical, and we gain in time. So also again there is a time benefit, which again it's helps in economical helping the economics of the project. Yeah, and the last but not the least advantage is the we mobilize the optimum ground self support capability. We are not relying on we are not stabilizing the ground itself, but the ground itself is stabilizing the tunnel. So further, researchers work on the same principle and develop a dual lining support approach, initial or final. So initial support is, as I already said, that it's outer lining to design to stabilize the rock during excavation immediately, and it consists of thin shotcrete lining. It can be SFRS, fiber reinforced shotcrete, or maybe plain shotcrete, depending upon the requirements upon the rock type. Systematically bolts or reinforcements like lattice girders and ribs can be installed if the ground is very poor. And a closing of invert is very important. Unless we close the invert in weak ground conditions, we will not be able to mobilize that uh, intact rock arch, which we have seen in previous slides. So this closing is required. If the support is heavy and the invert is not closed, we cannot mobilize that rock arch, and rock cannot be self-supporting. And once the rate of deformations are decreased, the rock arch has been initiated, we can go for final supports. And typically it is concrete lining or RCC cast lining, and or it may be fiber reinforced, depending upon the requirements or the conditions. It is generally not installed until the deformations of initial support have reached an acceptable limits or a decreasing trends, where we can say that we can move ahead and we can conclude the tunnel supports. It Even if the supports are, if the ground does not call for a final support, there may be some structural requirements, the traffic loads, or there may be some other requirements like fire accidents or some other incidental loads or waterproofing. So these are the requirements for which we need a final support lining. So, sequential excavation method, again, it's a typical component of any NATM procedure, because it depends how much disturbance we can accommodate and how much deformations we can accommodate with the available supports. So for that we have to design, we have to develop a sequence of excavation sorry to optimize the excavation efficiency or to achieve a safe tunneling space, because it depends upon how much disturbance you are creating, how much unsupported span you can accommodate with the given supports, and how to best utilize the ground strength, because it has to be a balance. There has to be a balance and in for how much you can excavate so that the ground strength is mobilized. So this is a typical 3D demonstration of a sequential excavation method where the ground strength is mobilized, and you can see that the tunnel is advanced in 3 phase: top heading, benching, and invert, and the ground stresses are mobilized at all the phases. So there has to be balance of how much big I have to divide all these excavation phases in, and how many drifts, and at what leg, what should be the lag between these phases. So everything will depend upon the ground conditions and the time of support, where you want to install the support. So this is again a long section of a tunnel with excavated in different phases, top heading and benching. So you can see that the effect of phase is extended up to different fractions of 2d, two times the tunnel diameter, where the d is the size of this heading, not the entire tunnel. And again, at the benching, the size of benching again will govern the influence of this benching excavation. So all this has to be devised very carefully while we design our initial support system. Now coming to the support elements, what are the support elements we normally consider? Is most common is the sprayed concrete lining. It can be varying thickness of 50 to 300 mm, or it can be a steel fiber reinforced concrete (SFRS). And yeah, for difficult ground condition, we have to go for SFRS. Obviously, for very poor and very high squeezing ground conditions. And we go for reinforcements when the shotcrete thickness is high and the ground is not able to satisfy to be stabilized with the shotcrete only. We go for reinforcements and lattice girders, reinforced ribs, rebars, and steel sets can be installed. Rock bolts are installed. Of course, steel or fiber depends upon the uh, on the function of that face. Either it has to be it's a temporary face or it's a permanent face. Pre-excavation support. We'll see all of them in detail in coming slides. Where the ground is very poor and it will not be stabilized by any support system, then we go for forepulling or piles, umbrella roof around along the crown, and may also club it with some grouting, pre-excavation grouting, to increase the stiffness and strength of the ground. And then final lining, it can be a cast concrete or it can also be a shotcrete, and depending upon the requirements or the functionality of the tunnel. And there can be reinforcements like rebars or wire mesh, depending upon the forces. And elephant footing, normally provided at the corners, at the inwards, where the forces are normally high because of sharp corners, sharp turns in the profiles. So in that case, we provide elephant footing. Sorry. So in the photograph, you can see that automatic shortcutting process is going on. These are how lattice girders looks like in the fabrication yard or at the after installation. So as I said, it's very easy to fabricate them at site. It can be either a 3-bar system or a 4-bar system. Very flexible and very handy, very easy to transport and very easy to install. Lightweight also. Another system is reinforced rib supports, which is nothing but a collection of rebars placed very closely and connected with the crossbars and tied with the rock bolts like this in this section. And this gives a stiff rib kind of structure to the shotcrete and provide additional strength. So this is again a very flexible and very adaptable system. Doesn't require a lot of machining or fabrication time at the site. These are the different types of rebars which are specified by NGI. And then if we require a little stiffer supports, we can go for steel ribs, I section or H sections, or top head sections. Like on the right side is a top head section. It's again required for very high stiffness. And these steel sets can be either stiff or they can themselves be yielding supports. Like this diagram shows how a top head section is converted into a yielding set. So when deformation come, it will slide. This is overlapped and there's lubrication in between, so that the ribs will uh, slide over each other, and they allow certain limit of deformations. Apart from this, there are some stress controller cylinders. Cells can be installed, like this installed already in a site. And this is the cross section of this stress controller cell. So when there is a stress, and this is the cross section you are seeing. So whenever there is a deformation, this will compress, and this lining, this is again yielding, so it adjusts itself. So again a controlled deformation process, and we can control the amount of deformation we want this cell to allow. So this is a few examples of yielding sets. And yes, this is a comparison of a stiff steel set or a yielding support. So if we install, so this is a very typical ground direction curve where we have on the y-axis support pressure and on the x-axis our displacements. So as the support pressure decrease, we have increased deformations. When we install a support, it will try, if it's a yield is stiff support, it will immediately try to gain pressure, and there will be less deformations, of course, and it will interact with the ground. It will come in equilibrium with the ground very soon, very early, at very no high pressure. But at this time, what will happen? The support has already reached its own capacity. So if there has been more increment in the pressure, more deformation, it cannot tolerate. It will either break violently or it will collapse. There will be some kind of disturbance. While an yielding support will uh, compensate the deformations from the day one, and once that limit has reached, then it will try to give supports, try to give some pressure, support pressure, and it will come into equilibrium with the ground at a lesser support pressure. So of course, then in this case, there will be a residual capacity available in the support, and it will be able to sustain for a longer time. So this can be installed where we can accommodate the deformations. So again, it depends upon the requirements or the functionality. Of course, we need to over excavate for this, for yielding support. Pre-excavation support, 4 polings and spiles are installed along the direction of advance. Sorry. So on the left side, you can see some 4-pole tubes are installed. These are hollow tubes which are grouted later on, and the idea is to provide a support, provide a roof, a temporary roof above the excavation space, and then install our supports so that the stresses are reduced, stresses are distributed. And spiles are nothing but solid steel bars, which are again installed in the direction of advance. They are of lesser length. Yeah. And then there are some more ground improvement methods like grouting, which can be installed, which can be done before excavation on the face or from the top, from the ground surface if required. Dewatering can be done if the shallow tunnel is there and we have a lot of submergence conditions. Ground freezing is another advanced methodology where you cannot either do dewatering or you cannot do grouting. So in that case, we have to freeze the ground and then do the excavation. So this is how a typical sequential excavation looks like. 3-phase excavation, top heading, benching, and invert with installation of 4 poles like this, and installation of ribs, rock bolts, and the advance of face of the top heading is ahead of the benching with a safe distance. So all this distance, how much uh, we can have in advance, this can be calculated using the interaction curves, the longitudinal displacement profiles of the face. Pretty much straightforward, and depending upon the support pressure we are getting and the time of installation of support, that is very important. And then we have very crucial part of an ATM, that is instrumentation and monitoring, because typically an ATM is an observational approach. We have to observe, we have to record how the ground is, how the support is behaving. For that, we have to provide some instruments. So most common is the convergence bolts by reflex targets, which are installed like this on the tunnel boundary, or some extensiometers which are installed inside the tunnel. Leveling of the walls and the ground can also be done like this. We can install targets, and robotic stations can be installed like this. So we can monitor the deformations 3D for the face, for the roof, for the walls at the same time, and the data can be transferred to the control room either remotely or with wire. Lining loads also need to be monitored because we need to see how much stress is developing in the lining. Radial and tangential stress cells are applied, installed, strain gauges are installed like this. And this figure on the right side shows stress cells installed radially as well as tangentially in the concrete, shotcrete. And the middle figure shows the strain gauges, vibrating wire strain gauges installed to the rebars. Of course, this is in the final lining, but this can also be installed in the lattice girders or ribs to see how much the load is developing. And some special kind of measurements can be done by using an invert probe. This is nothing but a tube which is installed in the invert, and using a device similar to inclinometer, typically an accelerometer, which is probed into this tube and see what is the profile of the invert. So this will give us the convergence. We can calculate it indirectly, the heave and the convergence of the invert. And apart from that, there are some non-contact technologies like 3D imagery or digital mapping of the face, which can be used to map the deformations and the movement at the face. After that, we have to see what is the method of excavation. So for method of excavation, typically for hard rock, we go for drill and blast method of excavation. For soft ground, as we are discussing the NATM, we go for mechanical excavation. If the ground is good enough still to take drill and blast, we go with some control blasting. And for weak rocks, we go for road header. This is a road header on the right hand side, and left hand side it's it's the drill and blast excavation. And for very soft ground conditions, we have to do it mechanically or using a backhoe operations like this. Because the ground is not good enough to take on either the road header or the excavation by drill and blast. So it has to be a very soft operation, very non sustainable operation. So now coming to soft ground condition, what condition we can call soft or weak. So typically, when the global strength is less than 2 MPa or even less than 1 MPa, we can call the ground as soft ground. It can either be a debris, it can be soil, it can be rock mass, it can be, whatever kind of material. It can be a shear zone. But then it has to be categorized, classified based on its squeezing. So in the photograph, you can see a very high squeezing in the Nath Pajakri headrest tunnel. Almost 1 meter convergence was observed after excavation. Of course, the ribs were not installed in this zone, so it was a shear zone material. So about 10% squeezing have been observed, and the entire material has to be remined. And then they have gone with the 4 pulling umbrella and some advanced pre-grouting measures like this. Now let us understand the squeezing. So this is a graph given by Hook in 2000 in his Terzaghi lecture. So there is a chart. There is a typical ground strength and the tunnel strain graph. Where on the y-axis, this is the tunnel strains, and on the x-axis we have the utilization ratio or the rock mass strength versus in situ stress ratio. So we can see there are 5 classes of strains. Less than 1% strain is very minor squeezing. Then there is minor squeezing, then severe squeezing. Above 5%, it is all very severe squeezing. So this is the squeezing, and strain is calculated with respect to the tunnel radius. So this is how the squeezing is classified. And for a simple calculation, let us assume a tunnel at 200-meter depth with a radius of 5 meter. And so we have a in situ stress of overburden 5 MPa. So for a strain of 5%, we get a equivalent rock mass strength of 0.7 MPa, 0.75 MPa. And for a 10% strain, the rock mass strength comes out to be 0.5 MPa. So this is the order of strength which we can also back calculate using these squeezing charts. So these are all empirical based on some case studies and experiences learned so far. So depending upon this, we have to decide our input parameters for design. So this is just a representation of a rock mass parameters using RockLab software. So you can find this rock mass parameters here and the global strength of the rock mass here. 0.515 is the global rock mass strength. So we have to see how much strength we are providing into the material, and accordingly we can see how much strain we can expect for this particular strength and the stress, of course. So above 5% is soft and weak ground, and below 2% is hard rock or good conditions, or better rock mass conditions, and in between there is a intermediate zone. So from this, this is some type of methods of excavation suggested by the researchers for multiple heading methods and full face excavation methods, and based on the squeezing. So no squeezing, we can go comfortably with only rock bolts or spot bolting with very thin shotcrete. And as the squeezing increases, we have to either increase the thickness of lining, or we have to go for more benching, more number of faces, multiple drifts, or we can go for temporary elephant foots, face supports for full face excavation, of course. And when we go for even very high or very severe squeezing conditions, then we have to go for multiple drifts on the face, and of course very stiff lining, very stiff reinforcements, and with 4 bowlings. And if we require full face excavation, then of course we have to split the tunnel into 2 smaller tunnels with sliding steel sets for extreme squeezing conditions. So this is just for taking a preliminary decision on what support system or what excavation sequence one should go in different squeezing classes, and depending upon the requirement of headings or the faces. Although there can be exceptions to this depending upon the functionality and the requirements of the tunnel. Now coming to the case study. So this case study is a design problem for a highway tunnel in Himalayas. Of course, I'm not at liberty to disclose the project details because still under construction, and there can be risk associated to that. So I'll be hiding the confidential data for that. So please bear with that. So this is a tunnel, but of course all technical details required details will be shared. A tunnel of 10 meter size was planned. Length was approximately 450 meter, half a kilometer. Tunnel shape was D-shaped, as was the contract requirement, and NATM construction method was adopted. And for investigations, they have done 4 boreholes. And the objective of the study was to do the geotechnical design for NATM, primary lining, and the final lining. From geotechnical, I mean that we have not done the structural analysis for the lining. Okay, so only the support and the strength and deformation analysis was done. So this was the longitudinal section of the tunnel. Approximately for more than 400 length was there, and the height of the overburden varies from 50 to 80 meters along the alignment. So this is one of the section which we have considered for analysis. So the height of overburden was roughly 80 meters, the maximum height, and there was valley on either side of the alignment. This is the site geology. You can see that the site was rock mass was very highly weathered sheared phyllites or shales. And this is the portal condition. So the site is very, very vulnerable, as we all know that Lesser Himalaya is very treacherous in terms of slides and collapses. So this was the same, no different, and we have very, very weak ground conditions. In dry state, it looks very stiff and very competent, but in rainy seasons or with saturation, it becomes very notorious. It slides on its own like this. So this was the condition. Coming to the rock mass classification. So this is the Q estimation for this tunnel for the geology. All the parameters required for Q were estimated. So one more fact I want to share with you guys is that NATM approach was developed even before the Q charts and Q developments, Q support system were developed in place. So this has supplemented the NATM approach for estimation of primary support system. So 0.23 of Q was established based on all these parameters, and an equivalent RMR was also calculated. And it was calculated from the Q, as well as it was also estimated at the site. So it was roughly varying from 25 to 30, 35. Now, primary support estimation using Q chart, it can be done very effectively using this chart, and it is used very oftenly. So this is the typical Q chart where we have span to ESR ratio on the right hand side and the Q rock quality on the x-axis. So we can say that we cover the entire spectrum of rock mass from very, very poor to exceptionally good rock mass. So this is the chart we have used using all this Q value, and the tunnel ESR ratio was considered as 1, considering an important tunnel, a national highway. So round length or the maximum unexcavated unsupported span was calculated also based on Q and was taken as 1 meter. And board length of 3 meter was considered. It was obtained from Q chart at a spacing of 1.4 into 1 meters. So this is 1 meter is the out of plane spacing in the direction of tunnel. So it has to be in line with the round length. It cannot be a fancy number. Initial lining thickness was considered 150 mm, and rib spacing of again 1 meters was considered. So from the chart, it suggests that RRS 1 category 1 is enough, and the support capacity of category 6 was enough. So this was the primary support estimation, and based on RMR also, it was similar kind of suggestions, which comes out to be there for 20 to 40 RMR variations. Sorry. Now having a primary support index in place, we then analyze the parameters. So from the boreholes, the relevant boreholes near to the section, we have this rock mass data. And using this test data, we have arrived at the rock mass parameters using ROGLAP estimations. And you can see that our ground strength, global strength comes out to be 0.630. And the modulus of deformation comes out to be 319 or 320 MPa. So it is, again, it's a very poor condition of rock mass. So then we have a simplified modeling of the tunnel in 2D, of course. And this was the tunnel model which we have created. We have also considered the hill with a simplified profile. And yeah, this is the model, how it looks. Entire ground was considered as same material, sheared phyllite, with a small minor overburden, which doesn't have much role to play. Only gravity load was initialized. With accordingly, we have placed the boundary conditions. Then in the model itself, we have done some iterations and see that there is a need to improve the primary support suggested by the Barton charts, the Q charts. Then we have gone with some thick spread concrete, 250 mm, and rock bolts of 6 meters and drips at the rate of 1 meter center to center. Hook and round plastic model was used because we have seen that Moore-Coulomb was not providing the accurate results. So we have used the hook and round plastic model. And then we have run the initial model using the two-stage excavation, that is top heading and benching for the D-shaped. And in the top heading, we have obtained a maximum convergence of more than 100 mm. That equates to 2.4% of strain. So it is severe squeezing case. And for full excavation, we have obtained a strain of 8% due to more than 400 mm convergence. This is again a very severe squeezing case, as we have seen in the Hooke's chart. And yielding zone was also about 3.5 in top heading and 5 meters in full face excavation. Of course, this is with seismic loads as well. So this is a little bit on the higher sides. So then we prescribed the supports and accordingly, and see that there is some room for improvements. We provided lattice girders in place of RRS. 3-bar lattice girder was provided, and 50 mm leveling course, and then 240 mm of shotcrete, and there is another 50 mm of cover on the ribs for shotcrete. Mechanical excavation was selected, as we seen that rock mass is very poor, and it's not safe to go for a drill and blast. There will be vibration induced deformations, there can be collapse due to vibrations. So so this excavation method was used, and as we know that this is step by step a very slow process, and it gives enough time to install the supports. And then primary supports were installed, like 4 bowling of 4 meters, 32 mm dia bolts or SDS were also used in collapsible grounds, and rock bolts of 6 meters were used, or even SDAs were also used for collapsible ground systems. And for instrumentation, we have used convergence bolts, 3D targets with the continuous survey. This is the typical support scheme we have used for the excavation. But the surprise, we came to some surprises after we have the top heading in place for some reaches of the tunnel. So these are the order of deformations we have obtained. Initial 100 mm zone was there, which matches with the initial assessments. But to our surprises, we have seen that there are some zones with above 300 or even above 600 mm of deformations, even after the installation of the primary supports. So that qualifies to the level of extremely severe squeezing ground conditions. That is about 10% here. So that means that we have to again revisit the ground conditions or our input parameters. Then we analyzed, we did some back analysis for estimating the ground strength, and we have used Hooke and Marino's approach, which is somewhat similar to what Hooke has suggested. But Hooke's graph was for unsupported tunnels. We need to introduce, because our supports were also in place. So this again requires estimation of in situ stress based on the overburden height and support pressure. How much support pressure is mobilized by these support element. So we have all 3 components of lining, lattice girders, and rock bolts. So all these supports pressure were calculated analytically. There are equations being developed for estimating all these supports based on the type of the supports. And finally, we calculated the support pressure versus stress ratio, which comes out to be 0.77. And these are the equations available to estimate the support pressure for lattice girders, for rock bolts, and of course for lining. We can calculate it and interpolate in between. And these are the Hooke and Marino's charts for the supported tunnel, and to find out the rock mass strength, we have used these charts. So now we are having support pressure to stress ratio of 0.7. So we have to use this last curve, which is there for 0.5 ratio. And using this curve, we have back calculated the rock mass strength. That is the ratio here for different rock mass deformations, tunnel diameter. Now see the difference is there. The strains are estimated with respect to diameter. While in Hooke's chart, it was tunnel radius. So this was a different estimation. And we come out with the rock mass strength of this order, 0.13 to 0.03. While what we were using is 0.63. So you can see even the deformation, which is matching with our deformation, is giving us Beck's estimation of 0.13. So there is a difference of mismatch of 6 times. So that means we have to revise the supports. For that, we have reduced the strength of the rock mass stiffness up to a level of 100 MPa and 65 MPa, which is very, very less. Even you can get from a test, you can get this in soil. For high squeezing zone, we have to use this stiffness parameters, and we have to apply core softening method while excavating. Otherwise, the excavation was not passing. It is going to collapse. The model was not converging. So, and then after installation of the supports, we calculated the forces in the supports. Like this is the only given for the zone of 6% strain. This is the displacements we are getting about order of 600 mm. And these are the forces which we are getting. So still the forces are very high, and they were not satisfying the support capacity checks we have carried out. And these were the results for the lining. So there is still some room to improve the support or to improve our sequential excavation. So for that, what we have done, we came up with some revisions like invert excavation was also introduced. It has to be 3-phase excavation, not 2. And side drifts will also be there. That means we have to maintain the central core and excavate the side drifts, erect the ribs, and close the ring to some extent. Then excavate the benching in 2 levels and provide some rock bolts in the side drifts as well to prevent the heave. There was a considerable heave as well, as you can see in this graph. And provide an invert arch. The profile of the arch, which was straight before, was converted into an inverted arch to minimize some forces. And we see that there are some reduction in the forces. Sorry. And this was the revised sequential excavation. That means there was a requirement that this size of this top heading could not be reduced less than this. There was a constraint. So this was the scheme given. After that, we go for the design of final lining. So it was proposed to go for a RCC cast lining of 300 mm, and this was modeled as a composite liner in the analysis. In this analysis, the liner was provided as a composite, where we can play with the slip in between the liner, and we can apply them in different stages, activate and deactivate them, and play with the stiffnesses. Drainage and waterproofing membrane was introduced in between, which was managed by defining the slip. Backfilling of the invert arch with lean concrete, applying hydrostatic forces with above for to match the groundwater table in case of the drainage is compromised. Apply seismic forces. Of course, as a separate case, we cannot combine both of them. And see the effect of long-term deterioration in the primary lining. So the primary lining was reduced to 50%, and the rock bolts were also reduced to 50%. And finally, we arrived at the forces in the final lining in different strains, different zones of strain observed. And these are the reduced forces we have seen in the final lining, of course. And all these forces were then utilized to design the structural steel for the final lining. This is how the forces looks like in the final lining only for the highest squeezing zone. These are the bending moments and axial forces. This is the hydrostatic case where you can see that hydraulic forces are applied all around the lining. And this was the seismic case. You can see that you can say that the yielding zone is reaching at the rock bolts, breaching the rock bolts. So we are not worried about that because this has already been compromised. The strength is already reduced. So they need not to worry about that. This is a long-term condition. The primary support has done its job. So we need not to worry about the yielding zone anymore. So then finally we come up with support prescription like this for different strain zones. That means we install with shotcrete lining, as a primary lining, and lattice girders in side walls. In invert as well, in very high squeezing ground condition, it has to be girders in the invert also with proper connections, and rock bolts in side walls as well as in the invert to prevent heaving in the very high strain zones. And finally, the final lining, which will be RCC 300 mm. With some footing, elephant foot, especially in the severe to very severe squeezing zone. So this was suggested in the for the final lining. So that final lining typically looks like somewhat like this: increased thickness at the corner to sustain the high forces, and the closure of the ring. So this ring has to close as soon as possible. We excavate the invert zone first with the primary concrete, the initial support, and then backfilled, and then then with the final cast concrete, and then backfilling for construction of roadways and the utilities, tunnel drainage and waterproofing was done before the construction of the final lining. And the details look like this: shotcrete with drainage layer, then waterproofing membrane, and then finally the cast lining. So so this was more or less the case study, and the conclusion which we can all derive from this is the NATM is an approach which allow us to do flexible support system and adjustable excavation method for tunneling, which is also economical and it's also beneficial. NATM is best suited for, I would say, not soft ground but uncertain ground conditions, because it gives us it allows us it gives us the choice to play with the support system. And of course, weak ground conditions are the best case for this. Soft ground condition, weak ground require exhaustive geotechnical investigations, because we cannot rely on 3-4 boreholes and couple of intact rock tests. We should also do some comprehensive field testing and maybe some pilot holes in the tunnel. And empirical methods prove to be helpful while predicting the tunnel deformations based on some back analysis that can also be done in the initial stages, which could have avoided very high deformations or some irrecoverable deformations, which we have seen in the top heading in our case. So these are some lesson learned also. And then multiple phase excavation and effective ring closure is very, very crucial, when we want to mobilize that natural support arch around the tunnel, especially in the very soft ground conditions, very weak ground conditions. So with this, I would like to end my talk. Thank you for your patience. I may have slipped a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Tariq. I think we'll take a few questionnaire. I'm just seeing the
Sure.
chat that Mr. Abhineet, he has asked that during initial lining, how much percentage shotcrete takes the lead from the surrounding mass?
Can you please repeat the question? I'm sorry, I just missed.
During initial lining, how much percentage
Yeah.
shotcrete takes the load from surrounding mass?
I mean, it's just not a question of how much percentage it takes. It's the otherwise. I mean, you have to decide how much percentage of load you want your lining to take. How much percentage of load you want your initial lining or initial support to take and accommodate after the installation. it's the otherwise question, because you are designing it. You have to. It's your choice. If you are designing a stiff initial support, of course, its share of load capacity, load sharing will be higher, of course, because the deformations allowed are less. But if you are designing deformable supports, in that case, the primary lining or initial lining will not take much load. It will just go on deforming with the tunnel. So it's our choice. Depends upon the ground conditions and the requirements, how much over excavation I can do, how much and what is the ground. Is it very, very weak? Of course, in that case, I have to allow for more deformations. So in as a thumb rule, we can say that as the ground strength increases, the load sharing will also increase for the primary lining. But how much? It's a different question. Yeah.
Mr. Kanav wants to ask, is stress release hole is necessary in tunnel and how to decide where to do?
Stress release.
Holes.
Stress release holes. Am I hearing it correct? Stress release holes.
Yes. Yes, I am reading this line only. Is stress release holes is necessary in tunnel? If Kanav is here, he can ask his question.
Let me see
Yeah,
the
sir,
chat
it's
box.
stress release hose.
Okay, stress release holes. Okay. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Sir, it's a
this is
kind of
also again.
pressure.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, it's a very special kind of treatment where we have already installed a, stiff supports, and the deformations which it can allow has already been done. And still we see that the load is increasing by means of either instrumentation or by buckling of some ribs, or maybe some cracks are opening. So we can say that the support has reached its critical point, but the stress is still increasing. So in that case only we have to go with this kind of release holes. But this is, I mean, this is not very, very advisable, approach. This has to be done in a very, very controlled manner, and it can go wrong very easily. It's a very sophisticated kind of thing, because you are creating a weak zone. You are trying to release that stress by an artificial, profile, by artificial release. So this is which need to be decided very, very carefully.
Okay, Moin wants to ask something. Moin is here.
Yeah, Mr. Moin Mushtaq is asking, we usually witness large overbreaks in Himalayan tunnels during excavation phase, as contractors are more concerned about excavation progress rather than maintaining a regular tunnel profile. How are tunnel overbreaks taken into considerations during design phase, especially at the time of final lining? So, as I understand, you are asking about the tunnel overbreaks. So typically, this is a construction related issue rather than a design related. I would say, I mean, design, from the design angle, it is, I mean, as long as the tunnel supports are in place, we need not to worry about this kind of stuff. So this has to be managed and it has to be controlled at the site level. Because what is happening, this happens because of poor blasting or poor profiling of the blast holes. That's it. Because I mean, I don't see it as a design issue. So at the final lining, because at that time we have to we already have passed this excavation phase, the primary support is already in place, so all that has to be backfilled by some treatment, by some local treatment, and final lining has to be cast in place. So whatever is the location, then it's hardly a design issue at that time.
Okay, Rahul wants to ask something. Rahul is here.
Yes. Hello, sir. Good morning.
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Sir, I just want to one thing. Just you presenting you the highway tunnel, you speculate RMR 30, but it seems like not a very poor rock mass as the final conclusion rock support you provided. So don't you think that when we are assessing the preliminary parameters like RMR and all these things, somehow we also considering many calculations, because for initially you provided the rock lining of 150 mm. It naturally seems for RMR 30 it's a class 4 RMR, so it is little lesser as compared to final conclusion. So it seems like most of the times we speculated first, but in terms of primary support, we should be more cautious as a designer to check all the parameters.
Yeah, I got your point, Rahul. That was estimation from the Barton charts only. That was not anyway prescribed. Hello, are you there, Rahul? Are you still with me, Rahul?
I'm just admitting him. I think he has somehow he has left the chat.
Yeah, I can see that somebody is waiting in the lobby.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Rahul, are you there?
Yes, I am there. Actually, it's a network breach for my connection. Sorry for that. Am I audible?
Yeah, I got your question. So what we have estimated based on Barton chart and RMR was only initial estimation. What we have provided initially was, of course, it was more. Initially, what we have provided was 240 mm, while what we have obtained from the
Yes.
Barton chart was only 125 or 130. So
So
because in the
actually,
initial
I'm worried
modeling, we
about
have
it.
seen that.
Yeah, actually, it's a 450 meter. We already took 4 boreholes. If in terms of Himalayas and considering any highway project, it is very large for a 450
Yeah.
meter 4 boreholes. And still, we are not speculating the right RMR, and it is really, seems like it's a kind of we are faster in terms of our initial assessment. That's my point.
Yes, you are right, because what we are obtaining from the boreholes is altogether different from the behavior what we have seen in the tunnel. You know, the ground seems good enough when we see from the logs or even map it on the surface. But in terms of behavior, in terms of after the excavation has been done, its behavior is altogether different. It's not synonymous with the parameters, which indicates that whatever methods we are trying to apply or use in this estimation, I mean, they are not, they don't have accommodation for this kind of material. So this material is very, very, I mean, kind of crazy kind of material. Its strength comes out to be something different. Its the behavior comes out to be something different. So point is that we should all.
It is always. It is always
Yeah,
with
so
the
we have to
Himalaya.
see all the angles for the estimation of rock mass strength from the investigations, from the back analysis, from the empirical approaches, whatever ways or means we have before the design. We should deploy those means and estimate the rock mass strength, and then design our supports.
So I need one suggestion or also during this portal discussion. Since it is an NATM, it is basically focused on geotechnical assessment. So we should try to locate our borehole in the knowledge of designer as well, so that we can get the good results in the assessment of tunnels. What do you think, Vinny?
Location of borehole.
Yeah, in the knowledge of designer, yeah, something like before finalizing the location of borehole, the designer
Definitely,
and
definitely.
geotechnical engineer should.
Definitely, but designer will also come out came to know about the geology only based on some investigations. Okay,
Yes, true, sir.
so initial investigation will only give a brief idea, and designer is also he cannot foresee that there is a bad zone just ahead or behind the borehole you have already drilled. He's not going to get that idea on its own. He can only interpret. So best thing is to give him a spectrum of data, and then it's up to him to apply the all available means and tools to interpret the strength correctly, and to model the excavation and the behavior as correct as possible with all the contingencies in place. There, of course, there can be
Thank you.
limitations to investigations. There can be budget constraints. There
Yeah,
can
yeah,
be
I got that.
logistic
As a
constraints.
designer, it is very difficult to assess the
So
Himalaya.
yeah, so I mean, it's not a blame game kind of, should not be a blame game kind of process that, okay, you just given me this data, so I designed this. As a designer, we should apply our judgment, his own, uh, wisdom, how best I can utilize this data or this information. Yeah, to minimize the surprises. Of course, there will be surprises, but yeah, this is a evolving process.
Armin,
Yeah.
Armin wants to ask something. Armin is here.
Sorry.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello
hello.
to everybody. Thanks for good information. Could you please say to us what is your reference to consider 50% initial lining for designing final lining?
You mean to say the degradation of strength?
Yes, you consider 50% of stiffness of initial lining to designing the final lining. Yes.
Yes, you are right. And this was obtained. This figure was obtained after so many,
what is your
trials.
reference?
There is a reference. I don't have that reference readily with me. But there has been some work which provides the degradation of concrete uh, in different kind of environments, in different kind of exposure levels. So according to that, we can consider the strength decay, and depending upon the service life of the tunnel, the service life of this tunnel was about 100 years. So for this, we have a curve which provides us the strength decay of the concrete, of the shotcrete, and that can be used to find out this decay. And in our case, in this environment, we comes out to be a little more than 50%, but we stick with 50% to be on the conservative side. And this is even more for rock bolts. They can be utilized even more than 50%, but still we have compromised for 50% of rock bolts. Yeah.
The last,
Thank
I
you.
think,
I want to say finally, in Iran, we consider 0% of initial lining for designing final lining.
Yeah, here also we do in certain scenarios, we do this kind of considerations. Yeah, but this was a collective decision which was taken to optimize the lining, the final supports, so that we take some mileage of the contribution from the primary support as well in the design of final lining. So this was done to
Thank you so
optimize the final. Yeah.
I think the last one from Anant Kumar, you just want to ask from the point of strength and durability, which kind of concrete is more suitable in NATM, the conventional concrete or the SFRC?
Yes, if the ground is, the simple answer is if the ground is good, have some self-supporting capability, some immediate stand-up time, then we can go with simple sprayed concrete, plain concrete. Or if the ground is not self-supporting and the stand-up time is very less, then we have to go with SFRS, steel fiber reinforced.
I think
Yeah.
that is the last question. I think thanks a lot, Sharik for sharing the knowledge for such an interactive presentation.
Thank
We definitely learned a lot about the NATM tunnels, and I thank you for giving us time and these attendees the opportunity to get the insight of NATM. Whatever more, if somebody wants to ask, we'll share the details, email ID of Mr. Sharik. They can definitely write him and have a conversation with him. Before ending this presentation, I would just like to tell everybody that all the presentation on the webinars which TAYM is carrying, they are available on our YouTube channel. You can see all the lectures there. And before ending this webinar, I would just like to inform you all that we have forwarded a mail to every young members that TAYM is trying to formalize a guidebook on the tunneling. So you can share all your case studies, research paper, whatever you want to share for the guidebook to TYM, so that we can include your research, your case studies in our guidebook. Thank you, Sharik. Thank you, everybody, for giving us the time.
Thank you very much.
We'll close
Goodbye.
it now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Sharik.